Whenever India will give battle, it will be at a time and place of its own choosing. These were the words of Prime Minister Lal Bahadur Shastri to India's Army Chief General J.N. Chaudhary, and he made his words true. Today, we are going to discuss the India-Pakistan War of 1965. Let us first see why this war happened. In March 1965, Sheikh Abdullah set out on pilgrimage to Makkah. On his way back to home, he stopped in Algiers where he met Chinese Prime Minister Zhou Enlai. Their conversation was not made public. On the background of recent Sino-Indian War of 1962, it was assumed that Sheikh Abdullah had discussed the possibility of independent Kashmir. As he got off the plane at New Delhi's Palam airport, he was placed under arrest. This happened exactly while Pakistan was nibbling away at the borders. For while Abdullah was on pilgrimage, a conflict broke out over the run of Kutch, a salt marsh claimed both by Pakistan and India. In the first week of April, troops exchanged fire in Rann. The Pakistanis used their American tanks to shell enemy positions successfully. Indians had to withdraw some 40 miles to dry land. Angry telegrams were exchanged before the two sides agreed to international arbitration under British auspices. Abdullah's arrest and the clash in Kutch had put an idea into the head of Pakistani President Ayub Khan. This was to foment an insurrection in the Indian part of Kashmir, leading either to a war ending with the state being annexed to Pakistan or in international arbitration with the same result. In the first week of August, Pakistan started Operation Gibraltar. Groups of irregulars crossed the ceasefire line into Kashmir. They proceeded to blow up bridges and firebomb government installations. The intention was to create confusion and to spark unrest among Kashmiris. Pakistan radio announced that a popular uprising has broken out in the valley. But in reality, the local population was mostly apathetic. Some intruders were even handed over to the police. On 5th August 1965, between 26,000 to 30,000 Pakistani soldiers crossed the line of control, dressed as Kashmiri locals. Using heavy artillery and mortar, they made a swift progress. The Indians fought back and in Uri sector succeeded in capturing the pass of Hajipir, a strategic point from where they could look out for infiltrators. By the end of August, both sides had relative progress. Pakistan made progress in areas like Titwal, Uri, Poonch, and India had captured Hajipir Pass 8 km into Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. When the hope of rebellion didn't materialize and aggression in Kashmir didn't help, Pakistan launched its reserve plan, codenamed Operation Grand Slam. On 1st September 1965, the Pakistani army launched a major offensive in Cham. An infantry division with 2 regiments of American pattern tanks crossed the border. Catching the Indians by surprise, they occupied 30 square miles within 24 hours. Their aim was to capture the bridge at Akhnur to sever links between Jammu and Kashmir and the state of Punjab. It was the only road link with Kashmir. By the 5th September, the Indian position was getting desperate, with the Pakistanis pressing hard on Akhnur. To relieve the pressure, New Delhi ordered the army to open a new front. On the morning of the 6th September, several tank regiments, supported by infantry, crossed the international border that divided the Punjab. They were heading straight for Pakistan's first city, Lahore. Pakistani troops and tanks were hastily redeployed from the Kashmir operation. Now commenced the most bitter tank battle seen anywhere since the end of Second World War. The two sides fought each other inch for inch, sometimes in barren soil, at other times in the middle of sugarcane fields. The Indians routed the Pakistan around Asal Uttar, but then, attempting to recapture Khemkaran, were badly mauled in turn. The Indian commander, a veteran of Second World War, said that he had never seen so many tanks destroyed, lying there in the battlefield like abandoned toys. The war saw aircraft of Indian Air Force and Pakistani Air Force engaging in combat for the first time since independence. The PAF's aircraft were largely of American origin, whereas the IAF flew an assortment of British and Soviet aeroplanes. It has been widely reported that PAF's American aircraft were superior to those of the IAF. The aeroplanes screamed en route to attack enemy's bases. A large tonnage of bombs was dropped by both sides, but as an Indian chronicler later wrote, luckily or unluckily, some of the bombs failed to explode. They were old and had been supplied to the contending parties mostly by the same source. The escalation of hostilities alarmed the superpowers, and on 6 September, the United Nations Security Council met to discuss the matter. The UN Secretary General U Thant flew to the subcontinent and after meeting leaders in both capitals, got them to agree to a ceasefire. The decision was made easier by the fact that in the Punjab, the two sides had fought themselves to a stalemate. With declining stockpiles of ammunition, Pakistani leaders feared the war tilting in India's favor. Therefore, they quickly accepted the ceasefire in Tashkent. Despite strong opposition from Indian military leaders, India bowed to growing international diplomatic pressure and accepted the ceasefire. On 22nd September, the United Nations Security Council unanimously passed a resolution that called for an unconditional ceasefire from both nations. The war ended the following day. Let us now briefly look at the aftermath of the war. Both nations claimed the victory in 1965 war. So was it a stalemate or a victory? According to some independent sources, the Indian army suffered 3,000 battlefield deaths while Pakistan suffered 3,800. The Indian army was in possession of 1,920 square kilometers of Pakistani territory and the Pakistani army held 550 square kilometers of Indian territory. The territory occupied by India was mainly in the fertile Sialkot, Lahore and Kashmir sectors, while Pakistani land gains were primarily south in deserts opposite to Sindh and in Cham sector near Kashmir in north. After the war, Prime Minister Lal Bahadur Shastri emerged as a national hero. Before the war, he was facing some power struggle, but after the war, his position was cemented. Since India was lost badly in Sino-Indian War of 1962, this victory raised the image of Shastri for leading India to victory. The United States and the Soviet Union used significant diplomatic tools to prevent any further escalation in the conflict between the two South Asian nations. The Soviet Union hosted ceasefire negotiations from 4th to 10th January 1966 in Tashkent, which is now in Uzbekistan. Indian Prime Minister Lal Bahadur Shastri and Pakistani President Ayub Khan signed the Tashkent Agreement, agreeing to withdraw to pre-August lines no later than 25th February 1966. Following the start of the 1965 war, both the United States and Britain took the view that the conflict was largely Pakistan's fault and suspended all arms shipments to both India and Pakistan. Despite repeated assurances, the United States did little to prevent extensive use of American arms by Pakistani forces during the conflict, thus irking India. At the same time, the United States and United Kingdom refused to supply India with sophisticated weaponry, which further strained the relations between the West and India. These developments led to a significant change in India's foreign policy. India, which had previously championed the cause of non-alignment, distanced itself further from Western powers and developed close relations with the Soviet Union. By the end of the 1960s, the Soviet Union emerged as the biggest supplier of military hardware to India. Let us have a glance at involvement of the other nations. During the war, China openly supported the Pakistani position. It took advantage of the conflict to issue a strongly worded ultimatum to India condemning its aggression in Tibet and hinting at nuclear retaliation by China. Internationally, the level of support which Pakistan received was limited at best. Pakistan received support from Indonesia, Iran, Turkey, and Saudi Arabia in the form of 6 naval vessels, jet fuel, guns and ammunition, and financial support. Following the start of the 1965 war, both the United States and Britain took the view that the conflict was largely Pakistan's fault and suspended all arms shipments to both India and Pakistan. The official history of the 1965 war, drafted by the Ministry of Defence of India in 1992, was a long suppressed document that revealed some miscalculations. According to the document, on 22nd September, when the Security Council was pressing for a ceasefire, the Indian Prime Minister asked Commanding General Chaudhary if India could possibly win the war, were he to delay accepting the ceasefire. The general replied that most of India's frontline ammunition had been used up and the Indian army had suffered considerable tank losses. It was determined later that only 14% of India's frontline ammunition had been fired, and India held twice the number of tanks as Pakistan. By this time, the Pakistani army had used close to 80% of its ammunition. Let us see what India gained. Ayub Khan calculated that Hindu morale would not stand more than a couple of hard blows at the right time and right place. He fell flat on his face. As it happened, the attack united the Indians. Many Kashmiris stood with the army against the invaders. From 1967 to 1977, 81% of India's arms imports were from the Soviet Union. After the 1965 war, the arms race between India and Pakistan became even more asymmetric, and India was outdistancing Pakistan by far. And the most important, it raised the morale of Indian army after the defeat in 1962 war against China and restored the military prestige. In our next video, we will discuss the initial years of India's first woman Prime Minister, Indira Gandhi, the years from 1964 to 1966. Thank you for watching this video. Please like, share and comment because discussion is solution. For more discussions, please subscribe our channel.